Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today we are taking a look at the Marauder, the Warden DPS build. Yeah, you guys are probably saying, what, Marauder? Haha. But yeah, it's just the name I gave it, and it's the Stamina DPS Warden build. The build itself is made to help you get to end game. Now, a lot of people don't understand why I'm releasing builds that help you get to end game and not true end game builds. The reason I'm not releasing true in-game builds, to be honest, is because there's already enough people doing that. That if I wanted to release these builds as in-game, I would do that. Trust me. But I want to get people into the in-game. Now, this build can be adjusted to help to make it more in-game viable, and I'll explain that at the end of the video. But while I'm going through explaining all the other stuff, I'm not going to explain how to make it in-game until I get to the end of the video after I do the parse test. So that's pretty much it. So let's get right into it. So here we are, 11k magicka, 17k health, 34k stamina. The build itself is, like I said, it's to help you get there, but it's set up right now to make it more viable for dungeon runs. And then with some minor adjustments, you can make it more viable to trials. And like I said, we'll get to that at the very end. So, we do have a 1500 stamina recovery with a 3196 weapon damage, 45% weapon critical. With our potion, though, we go up to a 3729 weapon damage with a 55% weapon critical. We have 12k spell resistance with 12k physical resistance. We are running the Warrior Mundus Stone with Dubious Cameron Throne. Now, you can use dual stat food if you want. It will give you better stats and everything, and it will give you more health, as you can see. So you will have more stamina and you will have more health, but it doesn't do anything for your weapon damage or your crit. It just changes these two things. Now, it will give you a little bit more damage to your abilities. Now, you can adjust this, like I said, and I'll show that at the end, but if you're running a dungeon, you're having some survivability problems, maybe running the dual stat food itself will be better. It does drop your stam recovery, though. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at the gear. I did try Veladrits, guys, with this setup, but I chose Selene over it, because with Selene or Veladrits, either one of them, you can see Selene gives you greater damage, and Selene's can happen every 4 seconds, where Veladrits is every 9. So Selene's actually works out a little better, even though it has a 15% chance to get the bear to summon. Veladrits is a 20%, but it's every 9 seconds. This is every 4 seconds. So it works out a little bit better with Selene's. But we are running 2 medium Selene pieces. The helm is tri-stat glyph. The shoulders is regular stamina enchant glyph. Both divines, in fact, make all your gear divines for this build to work really good. Moving down to the next 5 piece we're running is Night Mother's Gaze, and we are running a heavy chest with medium legs, both tri-stat, along with the tri-stat here. Really kind of gives us that balanced thing to our character, even though we're not using a lot of magicka. That having just that little bit of extra magic can help save us resources in the long run. So, on the 4 smaller pieces, we are running stamina, and like I said, all divines. And Night Mother's Gaze is really good, because it gives you a chance of increasing your penetration value when you do critical damage. It also increases your crit chance a lot, plus giving you a little bit of weapon damage on top of that. The next set we're running is the Automaton set, the Strength of the Automaton. Now, this set is a really good set for the Warden, because when you're on the front bar, you're going to get the 5-piece bonus of the extra weapon damage to your physical damage abilities. Now, if you look here, that's physical damage, physical damage, physical damage, physical damage. No disease damage, no poison. It's all physical. So using that automatons actually makes these abilities hit for more. So that's why I use the Strength of the Automaton on only the Warden. So it works out really good. We are running 2 weapon damage glyphs here with a stamina recovery. Again, we'll get to that later. But yeah, it works out really good. Moving down below, to the weapons, we are running a Nirnhoned offhand with the Frost enchant. You can put a poison enchant here. Either way, you're going to get about equivalent amount of damage. I just chose the Frost enchant because of that chance of applying shield, which applies minor main, by the way. The other one we're running is a infused main hand axe with a Crusher enchant. Now, the reason I chose dagger and axe, dagger gives you 2.5% extra crit, and the axe actually gives you 8% chance to add another bleed, which also does physical damage. So that also gets that physical damage, weapon damage bonus to your physical damage abilities. That heavy attack, a chance to bleed, is also part of it. So, and I'm running a Crusher enchant because after testing, and I will be clear on this, after testing, I can keep the Crusher enchant applied better than a tank can with a DPS. Go figure. Alright, moving on to the back bar, we are, you can still run a Crusher enchant on your tank if you want, and this still gives you greater chances of keeping Crusher applied to, like, trash and stuff that the tank can't, because the tank has to run around hitting everything. So you can get do this setup, and it still works out really well. On the back bar, we have a infused bow with weapon damage and spell damage. Anytime you have a weapon spell damage buff that you're going to apply to your character, use it on an infused weapon, because in every 5 seconds it reapplies. So it works out really well, especially on the back bar, because look at the weapon damage on the front bar to the back bar. It's much lower. So when you get that weapon damage back there, it does help stabilize your weapon damage on that back bar. Alrighty, so that's the gear. Let's move on to the skills. Now, the skills, I'm going to go over the passives like as quick as I can, guys. First, make sure you get all your class of passives, even if you're not using any class skills related to them. The reason why is because you never know. Down the road, you might find use for those skills. So, dual wield, all the passives, bow, all the passives. When it comes to your armor and the fact that you're wearing a 5-1-1 setup, and if you guys are wondering, I forgot to say that, it's a light belt. You're wearing a light belt with a heavy chest. So, going over the armor, make sure you get all 3 of the light armor passes. Even though you're not using a lot of that stuff, still get them. Medium armor, all the passives. Heavy armor, get the top 3 passives, because you really want Juggernaut, this, you really want Constitution for that. Whenever you get hit, you can restore a little bit of magic of stamina, whatever weapon type you're using. So since I'm using stamina, I get stamina back every 4 seconds. I get 108 back. And then also the extra resistances. Moving on to the world skills, I just fill in soul magic. Now you can be a vampire or werewolf with this build, it's up to you, but you won't notice a difference but recovery. And the reduced damage that the vampire gets, the increased stuff that the werewolf gets. You'll notice that, but that's about it. Everything else is pretty much the same. I'm just saying that. I mean, it's nice, but you don't really need it. Fighters Guild, make sure you get all the passives, because you are running Dawnbreaker, and Dawnbreaker gets increased weapon damage. You want Flawless Dawnbreaker, you want it on the front bar. But you also get Slayer, which increases your weapon damage by 3% for each weapon Fighters Guild ability you have slotted. We are running this on the front bar, so make sure you have it. And then get Banish the Wicked, because you want to generate that ultimate as fast as you can, especially in dungeons. You fight a lot of undead, Daedra, and werewolves. Well, mostly undead and Daedra. And then Skilled Tracker increases the damage your Fighter Guild ability does against undead, Daedra, and werewolves. Dawnbreaker does a lot of damage then. You don't really need Bounty Hunter, but you can take it. Persuasive Will, I get that. And then Undaunted, make sure you get these 2 passives. When it comes to Alliance War, yes, these skills are super important, so you need to get them. You need to get Resolving Vigor and Razor Caltrops. They are super important to this build, so you do have to do PvP. Racial skills, make sure you get all the Red Guard passives, and then on Alchemy, you can get Medicinal Use, and Provisioning, you can get Gourmand and Connoisseur. I'm going to tell you guys a secret on how to get these, by the way. If you are playing in Cyrodiil, and you want to get these really easily, the best way to do it is go to the CP campaign, 30-day campaign, get on there, get in a group that's playing, that's capturing keeps, forts, all that kind of stuff, but get in a big group and just go with them. You'll have this in a day, like these 2 abilities. It's not hard. And all you have to do is unlock the 2 abilities. You don't need any of this other stuff. It's going to be useless to you. But you definitely need these 2 skills. And that's it for the skills. Now let's go ahead and go over the skills on the bar. So starting with the first one, we are using Blood Craze. Now, I did use Rending Slashes with this build, but honestly, you kind of need that tad bit of extra just oomph that this gives you. So, and you're not a Nightblade who has the ability to use leeching strikes that can give you health back whenever you light or heavy attack. This you kind of need with a Warden. So, this it does damage. It does really good damage over time. A little tiny bit of damage up front. But it also heals you every 2 seconds for 9 seconds. So, it's pretty nice. Next up, we have Subterranean Assault. This applies Major Breach and Major Fracture, which helps in really a lot of group content to apply that Major Breach and Major Fracture. Usually the tank does it, but if you can do it, the better off your group is at doing damage. Now, you got to remember, with this, I get 5,000. With the Night Mother's Gaze, I get another 3,000. And then with the Crusher enchant, I get another 2,000. I actually get a 10,000 physical penetration. So I can actually just tear apart things with physical resistance. Like in the open world, they just melt. Next ability we have is Shrouded Daggers. Now, we use this for the damage it does. Now, it can bounce to multiple targets and do extra damage, but it also grants you Major Brutality, which you don't really need because you have a power pot going. And that power pot's going to give you crit, weapon damage, and stamina return. And if you guys don't know, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys this before we get any further. You have to use these kind of pots. They give you stamina, major endurance, increasing your stamina recovery, major brutality, and major savagery, which increases your weapon damage and weapon critical. These last for 41 seconds when you have alchemy maxed out, and then they have a 45-second cooldown. So for 3 seconds or 4 seconds you have no buff from this, but that's only 3 seconds or 4 seconds. That's nothing. So try to make sure you keep those because you don't always have this up. So next up we have Blade Cloak or Deadly Cloak. This does a lot of damage, especially for you, and then on top of that it also gives you a small shield from shrapnel, reducing the damage you take from area of effects by 25%. Then we have Resolving Vigor. This is a great group support. I'm sorry to say this. In a group, in a trial dungeon, it doesn't matter. It's always good to have this on your character. So it's just a good way to heal. Now, being a Warden, you don't necessarily need this because you do have a class heal in the Green Balance called Soothing Spores. You can use this. It's not as good as this, but you can use it if you don't have Resolving Vigor. Next up is Flawless Dawnbreaker. Really, really powerful ability, but honestly, you're not going to be using it much. You're going to be using it against trash, but against bosses, it's just not as good as the other ultimate you're going to use. Main reason we have this here, though, is the 5% weapon damage, but it does do really good damage. On to the back bar, where we have Rearming Trap. This does good damage up front, damage over time, and it can reset itself after 6 seconds. It'll rearm itself and then go through the whole process again while it's up. So you get 12 seconds of minor force, increasing your critical damage done by 10% for 12 seconds. Really good to have this. Next ability is Poison Injection. Does really good damage up front, good damage over time, and then when the enemy's below 50% health, does 260% more damage over time. Next is Endless Hail, just a really good area of effect damage ability for you to have. Now the next ability we have is Razor Caltrops, which is another area of effect damage ability. It does initial damage and then does damage over time. Remember, when you're on the bow bar, you're not affected by the automaton's damage, the 5-piece bonus, but you are affected by the 4-piece bonus, which is the weapon damage, so it's still really good to use. And then last but not least, we have Bullnetch. Bullnetch is going to give you stamina recovery and major brutality, increasing your weapon and spell damage again by 20%. You don't really need it for the weapon damage because you are using a power pot. You're using it for that recovery. And then finally, the last ability, and this is the one you're going to be using mostly on bosses, and that's because of severe testing, is Toxic Barrage. Toxic Barrage does a ton of damage up front. As you can see, 43,140 over 4.1 seconds. Now, after that 4.1 seconds is done, it does an additional 33,230 poison damage over 8 seconds. Now, I have tested this against Dawnbreaker, and Dawnbreaker cannot compete with Toxic Barrage. It just can't. And this actually does a lot better damage when you do it on the back bar. So, that is it for the skills. Let's move on to champion points. Very similar to my other stamina DPS build I released this week. 56 in Ironclad, reducing damage, direct damage taken by 20%. 56 in a Thick Skin, reducing damage taken from damage over time effects by 20%. 43 in a Hardy, reducing physical poison and disease damage by 10%. Elemental Expert, or Elemental Defender, 43 points, reducing damage taken from Flame, Frost, Shock, and Magic damage by 10%. Now remember, all these stack together. So this right here, having 10 and 10, they stack with this. So you get 30% reduced damage from direct damage. You get 30% reduced damage from damage over time. And then over here we have 16 in Expert Defender. If you guys didn't know this, a lot of enemies in the game, bosses, bosses, mobs, those kind of things, they all do light and heavy attacks, mostly. So getting an extra 10% stacked with this is going to give you a 30% reduced damage from direct damage, and then on top of that, 40% reduced damage. Just pointing that out. So it's really good to have this. Next, we have 23 in a Quick Recovery. This increases your healing received by 6%. Now, healer or DPS don't get any healing received, guys. They don't, unless you have a skill that gives you it. They don't really get it. So for them to have that 6% makes it greater, gives them greater survivability. So that's why I put the 6% in here. Is it's just overall greater for their survivability. Now, if you guys didn't notice, I have 3 points on a medium armor focus as well to give you 312 extra physical resistance. Alright, moving on. We have 23 into Warlord, and I keep doing this. I don't know why. I think I meant to put it in here and just forgot. So, 23 into Warlord. This reduces break free costs by 10%. We have 20 into Sprinter. This reduces sprint costs by 12%. We have 75 into Mooncalf. This increases stamina recovery by 14%. And by the way, when you have an animal companion ability slotted on the Warden, you get 12% extra stamina recovery. So you actually get a 27% stamina recovery. And I'm a Red Guard, so I get another 9% on top of it. Really good recovery. 43 into Tenaxity. This increases your Magicka or stamina return of a fully charged heavy attack. Since I'm using stamina-based weapons, both dual wield and bow are both stamina-based, I get stamina back. And your base return from heavy attacks is 30%. This actually makes it a 40% return, which keeps your resources really easily maintained, especially when you have a high stamina recovery. Moving on, we have 23 in the Shadow Ward, reducing our block cost by 10%. With the change to block cost being dropped to 1730, it's really good to build in the block cost reduction, even on DPS. And then 56 in the Tumbling, reducing your dodge roll by 20%. Alright, moving on to the middle tree. We have 35 in a Physical Weapon Expert and 51 in a Master at Arms. All of our weapons do direct damage, so doing light and heavy attacks with them, the bow, like, because we do light attacks on the bow side and heavy attacks on the dual wield, that's going to increase our damage with them by a lot. With having a 20 and a 19, that's a 39% increase. But we also get another 10 over here, making it not only 39%, but 50 or 49% increase in our light and heavy attacks. But I got to show you this passive we have over here in Animal Companions. For each animal ability slotted, there we go, we get 2% extra weapon, or 2% extra damage. So including our light and heavy attacks. So we have a 51% increase in our light and heavy attack damage on both bars. So it's really good to have higher direct damage from our light and heavy attacks. So building your heavy attacks up to a higher amount, and then this and stuff. Plus, you also get Butcher, which increases your light and heavy attack damage when the enemy's below 5%. And if you block, you do have a chance of redirecting some of that damage back to your enemies. So, moving on. 43 into Mighty. This increases physical poison disease damage by 10%. We have 56 into Precise Strikes, increasing all critical damage done, increased by 20%. Now, if you guys didn't know, Minor Force adds 10%. So that's 30% right there, critical damage. But your base critical damage is 50%. So 50 plus 30, that's 80%. Now, somebody uses Warhorn, you get Major Force, which increases your critical damage by 15%. That takes this up to 95% critical damage. That's almost 100% more damage than what you normally do in crit. And then 51 on Thaumaturge, which increases your damage done with damage over time effects by 19%. The only skills that are actually being affected by this on your character is this ability here, Blade Cloak, and this. This is not affected that I can tell by damage over time, by that. But I know this is, and I know this is, by a small amount, and this is by a big amount. So you're really not, and Dawnbreaker and that, but you're still, the point is that Thaumaturge, you don't need as much into it as you think, because most of your damage from your damage over time is actually coming from your max stamina pool and your max weapon damage. So, and last but not least, we have 4 points into piercing to increase our physical penetration by 413. And that is it for the champion points. Now I'm going to go ahead and show you guys a quick parse on this thing, so you guys can see how it works. So I'm going to go ahead and get this started. And I'm heavy attacking between all that stuff, by the way, on the front bar. On the back bar, I'm doing nothing but light attacks. And as you can see, I'm almost pulling 19k DPS right now. Oh, come on. I'm going to do my ultimate when I go back around. And watch how some of that damage is doing from that ultimate. It's doing upwards to 9k on some of the pops. I've made a few mistakes in here. But when I go back around, I'll do that ultimate again. Now, the other ones, the other way that you can do this, by the way, when you get to this side, and you get to the ultimate, is once you fire the ultimate, run back through this back bar. So that way you get more consistency off the back bar, DPS. And then back on the front bar. As you can see, I actually jumped up to 19k. And I'm probably might be able to hold that until the enemy dies. And I did. So I got 19,829 damage on that rotation. And that was with the Warden. And that's without using, like, having this build set up for trial. Now, if you want to set this build up for trial, it's really simple. The first thing you want to do is you want to change these enchants to all stamina, and then change this to weapon damage. Then you want to switch to using a dual stat food, so you get increased stamina and stuff. Your weapon damage will be a lot higher, and your stamina pool will be about 38k with a 17k health. If you set it up right, you just change these pools here, and you're ready to go. Now, that's just the stats. The rest of the stuff with the gear, you don't need to change anything but these into stamina glyphs. And then on the bow, you want to change it to a Maelstrom bow. That's it. Or you can even run a master bow. Your choice. And that's all you have to do. And the build is trial ready. It is vet hard mode trial ready. And that is the Marauder. So, I hope you guys like this build. I have had a blast playing and testing this build. I actually want to make this build on live, but unfortunately I have already got the Druid on live, and then I have my melee character, my Warden solo character on there, so I don't have room for another one. But I do love this build. It is really fun to play. It's really awesome. So if you guys like this video, hit that like button. If you guys want to see more builds by me, which I do have several more coming out this week, please hit that subscribe button. Other than that, I want to thank you all for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.